Hollywood has always been synonymous with film production, distribution, and exhibitions, and its strategic monopolization of the industry has only seen it expand. Since the early 1930s, Hollywood's Big Five, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and RKO, dominated control over the golden era of Hollywood. At this time, Hollywood began mass-producing movies, on a conveyor belt system, realizing that everyone wanted to watch movies, and the new advancements of technologies made this possible. At motion pictures' height of popularity, in the mid-1940s, the studios were cranking out a total of 400 movies a year, seen by an audience of 90 million Americans per week. During the golden era of Hollywood, films' themes often reflected social issues or situations true to life. These typically emphasized heteronormativity, grand narratives, and the stories with a linear narrative due to the limitations in film editing. These combined are the recognized characteristics of film in the classic Hollywood era. In French theorist Jean-François Lyotard's 1979 book, The Postmodern Condition, he reflected upon the previous state of film, criticizing grand narratives' legitimacy and the belief that they aren't to be completely believed. Grand narratives are ideologies aiming to explain human existence and the world around us and how we should live in it, which could be considered to be capitalism, political democracy, Christian religion, and natural science. It is the idea that everything can be explained without the presence from individual thinking. However, in 1979, Lyotard saw grand narratives to be oppressive, as one narrative conflicted another. Due to this factor of realization and need of exploration, I think, society began to stray away from this way of thinking. It is believed the people were heavily radicalized by the impact of mass destruction and horror-filled deaths witnessed in World War II. The Second World War opened people's eyes to how they were being controlled by the people in power, and God could not in fact save them from the system that has been created in order to control them and keep them complacent in behaving how the government wanted them to act. Moreover, it reshaped the way in which people interpreted religion, understanding that millions of deaths and horrific tragedy had occurred without God. It began to get the wider population to question the grand narrative of religion and whether this was actually true or a lie that had mass believed without any proof which held any substance. As well as this, World War II had destroyed the idealism of the utopian world in which society as a collective were working towards experiencing. Living in a utopian world meant having what is perceived as perfection. Between the years of 1800s to the 1950s, this involved a husband and wife living in a perfect marriage, religion, and conservatism. This was reflected in film through the binary stereotype, which portrayed women as helpless and complacent to their husbands or men in power under the patriarchal hierarchy. It is seen in films such as Some Like It Hot and Gone with the Wind. In Some Like It Hot, Hollywood starlet of the classic Hollywood era, Marilyn Monroe, was portrayed as a simple blonde ditzy woman who was infatuated with sex and men and a concept. This was common for the times, as women were seen as inferior to men, and this was strongly emphasized in film to reinforce this narrative. Although in most instances, this wasn't the case, especially for Marilyn Monroe, whose intelligence was concealed for the filmmakers to have control over her portrayal, as a bombshell blonde. This harmful stereotype was her complete identity, and failed to ever recognize her 168 IQ. As we know, the film industry reflects the changes which society is experiencing. So, the end of the modernism era was because of the progression in society moving from believing the grand narratives, spiraling into exploration of thought. Postmodernism is a complex term to define a reform in way of thinking, which classifies a range of ideologies. Broadly speaking, postmodernism is more than a style of media, and instead a thought process to invoke feelings of renewal and to push freeformed thinking. Postmodernism can be seen as the complication to modernism, as modernism was the predecessing era of postmodernism and challenged the established stereotypes of the modern world. In contradiction, modernism relied on grand narratives, binary stereotypes, and a linear narrative. While on the other hand, postmodernism dismissed the grand narrative and encouraged that our own lived experiences are more concrete than abstract principles. As society was undergoing these changing beliefs, it manifested itself into the world of film and broke the frameworks of film, creating new concepts of understanding in the rejection in once believed ideas. Postmodern film was heavily reliant on themes of hyperreality, more human than human, altered state, flattening of effect, pastiche, parody, and time bending. Evidentially, these were reflected in the works of directors such as Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson, Guy Ritchie, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Edgar Wright, who were pioneers of the style of film. As one of the highest re-gauged postmodern filmmakers, Tarantino featured homage and pastiche, creating high films to mimic some of his favorites in a respectful way. It is an iconic feature of most of his movies and is included in Kill Bill Vol. 1 through the homage to martial arts films. As a director, Tarantino has a well-known genre homage approach to his films, and the audience will anticipate it as a postmodern theme. To further highlight Tarantino's impact on the genre, films such as Kung Fu Panda have gone on to parody this in their films. Often, he takes a lot of inspiration from films or directors he admires. Kill Bill Vol. 1 was aesthetically inspired by classic Japanese films such as Seijun Suzuki's Tokyo Drifter and Branded to Kill. The two films contrast each other, with Tokyo Drifter being cartoonish and brightly colored, while Branded to Kill has an overall dark and moody theme to its color scheme. These two inspirations come together to make the split sides of Kill Bill, as Tarantino feature both bright pops of color, but with an overall moody theme. Furthermore, the plot of the movie was also very similar to Tokyo Drifter, as both feature a retired Yakuza boss needing to complete one last mission of revenge against their enemy. Moreover, postmodernism can be seen in most newer movies from 1960s onwards, as it reflects the state of society we are living in. Theorist Derrida is considered a father of the postmodern theory, with his understanding that literal language needs to be expanded from what is just written on the paper. By this, he means that the Western world has a tendency to rely on the signifier over the signified, expressed as taking what is written as literal fact rather than understanding the deeper implied meaning. In films such as the cult classic Trainspotting, where Derrida's theory is heavily depicted through the use of imagery on screen juxtaposing the message trying to be relayed. Trainspotting's eye-catching visuals, iconic soundtrack, and on some levels character relatability has seen it be regauged as a lovable piece of nostalgia. While this is the case, the anti-drug message that is relevant for the 1990s reflecting the government's Choose Life campaign is disregarded.
As one of the most culturally significant forms of media, the approach and concept of film has undergone many different changes in order to stay relevant. Film is a global industry worth $76.7 billion, as for 2022, and has kept expanding ever since. Film has always been a visual crutch and an expressive outlet for directors to unravel the narrative they are wishing to bestow upon their audiences. The infamous theorist, Fredric Jamerson, argues that postmodernism or anything beyond modernism is categorized as crisis of historicity, a wanting-off effect and a prevalence of pastiche. Through his Marxist perspective, these ideas are discussed in his book, detailing how he believes the postmodern is a mass culture driven by capitalism. The film industry is one of global proportions, and Jamerson's theory accurately reflects its current postmodern state. Moreover, changes in Hollywood and the impacts of the convergence of technology, especially as the threat of AI looms more deadly, forced Hollywood to evolve with society and technological advancements. This leads us to where film is now, in a postmodern state.